Starter. Anybody ever seen that on a job sort of outline? You've got to be self-starter. You've got to be self-motivated. You know what? Not needing direction every step of the way, but be able to get to the task. And you know that in that type of a job environment, there is a responsibility that weighs on you, that nobody's going to be pushing you to do it. You've got to do it on your own. You've got to do it on your own. Some people are natural self-starters. They see a task and they get it done. That's just how they work. They can get the task done before somebody notices it needs to be done, and it's done. We've got some of those folk here in the church. They see a task, boom, it's done. There are some things, I've been here over 2 years, there are some things I still don't know who does it. But I know that some things, if they didn't do it, would be left undone. But they're self-starters. They get in there and get it done. They're task-oriented people. They bear the burden. They bear the burden of what needs to be done. Maybe you've worked in a group environment at an office, or maybe at school, or maybe you've worked in a setting where there's a group project and a bunch of colleagues are working together, or a bunch of students in your group are working together, and you also know the other side of this coin. You know the side of the coin where one person is doing the whole assignment, all the work, and the rest of the group is simply there for moral support. And you think, why isn't everybody carrying their load? Why isn't everybody doing their parts? Paul says this, he says, listen, you have been slaves, you know what it's like to carry the full burden. And now you've been set free from that. And you go, it's not my job anymore. I don't have to do it. I don't have to worry about it. It's no longer my responsibility. That's how the Galatians were. They thought, well, I'm no longer a slave. I've been set free. And Paul goes, beep, back the truck up. Because now there's a new burden you need to carry. What? We were slaves. We've been set free. We don't have to do that anymore. That job for us is done. Oh, no, you don't understand, Galatians. Now that you live by the Spirit and you walk in the Spirit, there is a new burden you must carry. And it is a burden that is to fulfill the law of Christ. So don't think because you're no longer a slave that although Jesus calls you friends of God, don't think that you've been released to no longer carry any burdens. But there is a burden that is placed upon you that you must carry. And so he illuminates for them what that burden is. What's really important here is that you understand, that I understand, that in our 21st century context, there's a burden that we also carry. You've been there before. You know what it's like. When you're feeling overwhelmed by something and somebody comes alongside you and walks with you, they're helping carry the burden. You know what it's like when you're sick and somebody comes to visit you and you say, boy, somebody's carrying the burden. You know what it's like when you're feeling down and somebody calls and says, I was just praying for you. Do you know that in the Spirit, they were carrying the burden for you? You say, why did you call today? Well, you've been on my mind all day. The Spirit of God was placing the burden on them for you. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? It's a wonderful thing. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've had a responsibility that's been too large, and you thought, how am I going to tackle this? And somebody comes along and says, here, can I help you with that? And you're like, really? Yeah, can I just give you a hand? And it's like, wow, this is so much easier now. I can do this with somebody, but alone I wasn't sure how I was going to get through it. I was on my way back this morning. Because of the lateness of the wedding experience last night, some people don't work on Sundays. And because of the lateness of the wedding experience last night, we came in from Coburg this morning. We drove in early this morning from Coburg. And on my way into to town here from Coburg, my cell phone rings, and I'll avoid saying who because that wouldn't necessarily be what they want. But somebody calls me and they says, I was just over at the church this morning, and just so you know, it was really warm in the auditorium because it's been muggy here the last few days, and so I just turned on the air conditioner for you, so it might just give you an extra 10 or 15 minutes at home. How many people know that's burden carrying? Isn't that amazing? Something so simple, but means so much. I hung up the phone from that call, and I said to my wife, I said, man, this is great. It's 10 or 15 minutes, whoopee-doo. But how many people know when we carry the load together, the load's a lot lighter? Isn't it? And it reminds us, and it reminds you, and it reminds me that there are simple things that we do not out of the goodness of just our hearts, but out of the goodness of the Spirit of God that we walk in every single day that allows us to carry the burden for somebody else. Maybe there's a situation you're in today and you're going, I don't know why I got myself into this mess. I wish I would have never, ever said yes. Can I ask you something? Were you in the Spirit when you said yes? And are you in the Spirit now? Because we'll say yes to things in the Spirit that we wouldn't say yes to naturally. And sometimes when we go, I don't know about that, it's because we're thinking in our natural form. But when we're in the Spirit, we go, you know what, I'll do that. I'll carry that load. I'll share that weight. I'll walk with that person. I shouldn't have to. It's not my problem. I shouldn't have to worry about it. But I'm going to, because I know for them it's